The Myth of Oedipus. Laius, king of Thebes, who was married to Jocasta, daughter of a nobleman of the same city, had been horrified to learn from the oracle of Apollo that he was destined to be murdered by his own son. The oracle of Apollo always told the truth, and as a result, the terrifying revelation shocked and unsettled both Laius and Jocasta to such an extent that they agreed between them that the infant should be killed to avoid the disastrous prediction. In due course, upon the birth of their son, Laius bored holes in the newborn's feet, strung them together, and gave the baby to a servant, instructing him to leave the infant on the vast mountainside to perish in vulnerable isolation. Despite agreeing to follow these diabolical instructions, the servant instead entrusted the baby to a passing shepherd, who in turn delivered the infant to his master, King Polybus. The king took pity on the child known as Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, and accepted him into his household, asking his own wife, Merope, to love and care for him, which she gladly did. Oedipus grew and matured into a young man oblivious to his true parentage, and who loved and deeply respected Polybus and Merope. There came a day, at a sumptuous banquet where Polybus, Merope and Oedipus were present, that a nobleman made a cutting remark to Oedipus, teasing him to the effect that his paternity was questionable, and that to his mind it was likely that Polybus and Merope were not his true parents. Stunned and frightened, Oedipus ran to his mother, insisting that she confirm the falsehood of the allegation. Although she was gentle and kind in her reply, Oedipus felt unconvinced by her words, and of his own accord decided to seek out an oracle himself, who would tell him the truth. Oedipus departed Thebes for Delphi to find the oracle, and once he had done so, posed his urgent question. The oracle in reply refused to confirm the identity of Oedipus' parents, but instead conveyed what was to Oedipus an even more horrifying prediction. She told him in no uncertain terms and beyond all doubt that he would, in time, murder his own father and sleep with his mother. Oedipus was devastated by this revelation, and believing that the parents he was fated to kill were Polybus and Merope, whom he loved with all his heart, he committed not to return to them in Thebes and instead made his way to Boeotia, believing that this action would protect both them and him from their hideous fate. It came to pass, however, that en route to the city, Oedipus was almost run down by a chariot because, as it passed him with an old man and two servants sitting in it, Oedipus was violently shoved out of the way. Enraged, Oedipus struck the old man in the chariot with an enormous stick and stood watching, horrified, as the old man sat back down on the seat of the chariot and died. Incredulous at what he had done, Oedipus fled, unaware in every respect that the man he had killed was in fact Laius, king of Thebes, his true father. While Oedipus had been away in Delphi in search of the oracle, a sphinx had been sent to Thebes as a punishment to the Thebans. The sphinx, a monstrous creature with the head of a woman, the body of a lion and the tail of a snake, would allow no passers-by into the city unless each correctly answered the riddle it posed to them at the gates. And if the passers-by were unable to solve the riddles, which they were torn into pieces and eaten by the sphinx. In response to the scourge that the sphinx was to the people of Thebes, it was announced that the person who could solve this riddle would be handed the kingdom of Thebes and the hand in marriage of now widowed Jocasta. Entering Thebes, Oedipus was tempted by the idea of winning the kingdom and the hand of Jocasta, and boldly asked the sphinx the riddle. The sphinx posed its dreadful question: what creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 in the evening? Oedipus thought, and wisely answered, a human being, who crawls as an infant, walks upright in adulthood, and with a cane in old age. His wisdom not only defeated the hideous Sphinx, but ensured that Oedipus was crowned as king of Thebes and husband of Queen Jocasta. For many years, Oedipus was happy and his life was peaceful. He and Jocasta had 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters, but later, when Thebes was hit by a terrible pestilence, King Oedipus asked an oracle how they could rid themselves of this hellish infestation. The oracle asserted that the pestilence would continue until the land was purified of the blood of King Laius, whose murderer was living uncaptured and unpunished. King Oedipus invoked a reward for anyone able to identify the murderer. Agreeing that the evildoer must be found and caught, he sought out the blind man Tiresias and implored him to reveal the killer's identity. At first, Tiresias hesitated, but after a time he earnestly told Oedipus, "You are the murderer of King Laius, who was your father, and you are wedded to his widow, your own mother." In order to convince Oedipus that he was telling the truth, he brought forward the servant who had taken the baby from Laius and Jocasta all those years ago, as well as the shepherd who had taken him to King Polybus. Distraught and in a state of shock and grief at the revelation, Oedipus blinded himself, and Jocasta, equally ashamed, took her own life by hanging. Oedipus fled Thebes and was to live out his days miserable, homeless and outcast, a beggar who was looked after in poverty until his last days by his daughter Antigone.